Me hubiera gustado que entraran más periodistas.
I wish more journalists could have come. There were more.
Son pocos. Porque la campaña principal contra
But there are few here because the main campaign against Venezuela is in the international media. They want to justify a military intervention in Venezuela again. They want to justify sanctions against Venezuela again. They want to justify violence. And really touch your hearts, those who are responsible. If you have any heart left. Because they want to drag Venezuela into a civil war again. Why? Why this attack against Venezuela? What has Venezuela done to you, to the media in the United States, in Europe, in the West? Because the West simply does not accept that there is a reality, and we have another world, and Venezuela has the right to its independent and sovereign project. Why this ongoing campaign? First, to destroy our economy. How much damage was done to our economy, and now to try to bring about a civil war with criminals and thugs who could harm any of you. There was already a correspondent from an Eastern media outlet who was covering live and was hit by a group of criminals in Anzoátegui, I think it was Lecheria. And when he turned back to his car, how much does it cost to have a car, right? They had burned it. Does the path for Venezuela have to be to allow criminals, trained, paid, and drugged, to take power? How many more proofs do we need to present for you to say enough? It's okay if you don't like me, if you didn't like Chavez.
Now, amidst these claims of this Venezuelan leader that these Western powers, and in particular the United States, trying to cripple Venezuela and ensuring that the country goes down on the floor. Now, I want to read this article that better explains how there is, or the origination of the crisis of economy in Venezuela. Now, Venezuela has become a popular argument against socialism amongst conservatives because of the deep economic crisis that is traversing the whole region. Now, defenders of the Bolivarian project, though, say that US sanctions and economic war are to blame for the crisis. Greg Wilpter presents an analysis that although this has been something that is really affecting Venezuela, but we have to look beyond what we see, because there's someone somewhere causing all this crisis. And one of the main talking points is how Trump's administration reacted to the situation in Venezuela. And this was Trump's statement. But it's a very sad thing. We are not looking for anything other than taking care of a lot of people that are starving and dying in the streets. What's happening there is a disgrace. This was one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and all of a sudden it's greed-stricken, poverty-stricken, no food, no water, no air conditioning, no anything. Now, leaving aside the question of whether the situation deserves to be called a humanitarian crisis, something former UN Special Rapporteur Alfred de Zayas has disputed, what is undisputed is that there is an economic crisis in Venezuela. Exactly how did this crisis come about? That is what we have to unravel in this video. Whose fault is it? And is socialism to blame? And can Venezuela get out of this whole economic crisis? Now, before we examine Venezuela's economic performance during Maduro presidency, it makes sense to take a brief look at the time before Maduro took office. Ever since the 20th century, Venezuela has been a major oil exporting country. Just like today, already back then, oil exporters made up over 9% of their export revenues. As a result, All other forms of economic production, such as agriculture, dropped a very small fraction of the country's economic activity. As long as oil prices rose, which they did fairly consistently until the late 1970s, Venezuela's economy grew in tandem with rising oil prices. The economy boomed when oil prices quadrupled during the 1978 OPEC oil embargo. However, little by little, oil prices began to enter a phase of instability and even decline, dropping below $10 per barrel in 1998, the year that Chavez was elected president of Venezuela. Along with this oil price instability, Venezuela's economy also lurched from one crisis to the next. This provided the background for Chavez's election in 1998. Venezuelans were fed up with the economic uncertainty and consistent decline. Real per capita dropped from 27% down to 20 around 1999. Meanwhile, poverty rose from 15% to 65%. Look at that short duration and the drastic changes that happened affecting the people of Venezuela. So gradually, oil prices were affected. A new period of volatility set in following the global financial crisis when Chavez decided to reduce public spending because oil revenues were down. As prices recovered, the economy recovered as well. Ultimately, though these efforts at diversification failed, they failed for two closely related reasons. First, ever since 2003, the government implemented a fixed exchange rate in order to control capital flight and the depreciation of its currency, and also as a means of subsidizing essential goods by allowing importers of things like food and medicine. Immediately following President Chavez's death from cancer in 2013, the pressure in the currency in the form of the black market exchange took another hit. The gap between the official exchange rate and the black market exchange rate began to increase to unprecedented levels, further exacerbating inflation, corruption, and shortages. When oil prices declined during Maduro's first year in office, reducing imports, this vicious cycle intensified yet again. Maduro tried to adjust his economic policies periodically by adjusting the official exchange rate slightly, but the gap between the official exchange rate and the black market rate continued to grow, so that a dollar purchased at the official rate eventually cost merely 1/100 of what it cost in the black market. Then in 2015, Barack Obama, the president by then of the United States of America, declared Venezuela to be an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States, allowing him to impose targeted sanctions against individual government officials that the US accused of being involved in drug trafficking and corruption. These sanctions, although they were targeted on individuals, began a cascade of financial restrictions on Venezuelan financial transactions and of bank accounts, leading to closings of accounts, making imports and financial transactions increasingly difficult for the government. In 2017, Trump drastically intensified the sanctions by prohibiting US institutions and individuals from trading in Venezuela debt. This made it impossible for Venezuela to restructure its debt and further restricted the government's ability to engage in international trade. It was no coincidence that Venezuelan oil production began to plummet at the same time that the Trump administration's sanctions took effect. There could be something sinister that was being cooked in the Trump's administration. Let's continue seeing what happened. Now, Venezuela's oil industry depends on crucial replacement parts and oil derivatives from the US, which it could no longer import. As a result, the oil production decreased from about 2 million barrels per day to 1.2 million between August 2017 to 2018. By late 2017, shortages and inflation had gotten so bad that hyperinflation set in. Now it goes on and on to prove that there is a factor that played a bigger role in the situation that Venezuela's went through. Now, finally, we cannot leave out the impact of the sanctions because, as mentioned, their effect has been devastating, but they are not the cause of the onset economic crisis. There was so much interest by the Western countries, that is the United States in particular, to ensure that they get control of the rising economic oil market of the Venezuelan countries. That is how America and other Western countries get hold of different countries. And so far, we saw what happened in Africa when Muammar Gaddafi was also rising and making Libya be a great country. He tried to change the situation and even led to his death. So even as we watch this, let us always teach one another that we have to do things right. We have to ensure that every country is left to make decisions in the right way. Let us not gag other countries as we want to build our economies. Now, you can also make your comment on this. Hit the comment section and tell us what you feel about this video. If you're watching us for the first time, kindly consider subscribing. Also, like and share. Thank you, and may God bless you.